Okay, so Divi 2.5 was released and Elegant Themes produced a few videos, and usually if you've seen my prepared videos, then you know what I do with these. I basically make a page where it's easy for you to find the topics that are being addressed in these videos, and this video is nothing else than that. It's exactly the same. So enjoy the videos. And another thing that I wanted to say is recently I've been watching Divi Nation, and I can really recommend it. I will put the links to several of these videos and the podcasts below the videos, so you can check them out also. They're really worth watching. Okay, so enjoy the videos.
In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the Divi Role Editor. Now, if you're not familiar with roles within WordPress, they are assigned whenever you create a new account, and they just represent the type of user you are within the WordPress dashboard and the type of privileges you have within the WordPress dashboard. For example, if you're an administrator, that's one role, it's the highest role, and it allows you to do everything. You can upload new themes, you can change themes, you can adjust your website titles and permalinks, and do all this stuff that only the owner of the site should be able to do. Next on the list is editor. Editors can do a lot. They can make new pages, they can make new posts, they can add content to your website, but they can't control the overarching settings, like I said, such as a lot of those general settings and things like theme options and uploading stuff and adding and installing plugins, deleting plugins, all that stuff. So it might be common, if you're a freelance developer, to have yourself as an administrator, and then when you hand over the site to your client, you might want to make them an editor, and this would allow them to control the content on their site, but it wouldn't allow them to do things that might be disastrous to the website, such as deleting things, deleting plugins and themes, or installing new plugins and themes, or updating things when you're not ready to update. These things that they might not understand the repercussions of. And so it's something we recommend anyways, if you're managing a client website, to keep yourself as an admin and then create a user role for your clients that uses the editor user role. And that can just create a little bit safer of a relationship for you and your client. But those roles don't have any control over Divi. So no matter what role you are, if you're an editor, a contributor, or an administrator, those are three roles that allow the creation of content on your website. As long as you have access to pages, and creating new pages, you're going to have full access to the Divi Builder. And so what we did is created a whole list of roles and privileges that can be assigned to the different standard WordPress roles, as well as any custom role that you might create using a third-party plugin. And so, for example, you could have your administrators have full access to the Divi Builder, but you might have your editors, your editor roles, which are your clients, have limited access to the builder. Maybe they can edit stuff, but they can't delete stuff, or maybe they can only edit certain modules. Maybe you don't want them to have access to the Divi library, or you don't want them to mess with global modules, or you just want to simplify the builder and take out settings. You can take out settings for certain roles. And so that's what the Divi Role Editor does. It limits the Divi Builder for each particular role or custom roles that you've created. And so just to clarify what a role is one more time, if you go to add a new user within WordPress, you can see the roles here. And like I said, there's administrator, editor, author, contributor, and sometimes you'll have custom roles as well. So we have WooCommerce installed, and they have a couple custom roles, which is customer and shop manager. A customer, for example, is kind of similar to a subscriber, doesn't have access to creating pages and stuff, but allows them to log into their CRM. Okay, let's jump into the Divi Role Editor, and I'll show you how this stuff works. To access the Divi Role Editor, go over to the Divi drop-down menu and then click on the Role Editor link, and this will launch the Divi Role Editor. At the top, you're going to see various tabs, one for each of the different author roles that you have within WordPress. Now, there are 4 roles by default that have access to the post editor and therefore access to Divi, and those are administrator, editor, author, and contributor. And so, like I said, you might have a client that you've assigned the editor role to, and so if you want to edit their privileges within the Divi builder, you'd want to click on the editor tab. And you may notice some additional roles here, which could be assigned from various plugins you have installed. For example, there's the shop manager that comes with WooCommerce, and so you can edit these custom roles as well. Okay, so just to show you how this works, I'm going to be editing the editor role, and then I also have logged in as that editor over here. So as I edit the privileges, I'm going to show you what that does within the builder. Okay, so coming back to the role editor here, the different privileges are categorized. So at the very top here, you're going to kind of have the highest level options. In this case, that's access to the Divi library and access to page options. Page options is that little Divi settings box you get to the right of the post editor. Next up, you can enable or disable various high-level options within the Divi builder. For example, you can disallow people from adding new items. You can stop them from editing items, stop them from moving items, and so on. There's various Divi library settings. You can disallow people from saving to the library or adding from the library, and you can also stop them from editing global items. So you might have a global item you're using as a global footer throughout the whole site, and you're worried about your client accidentally editing that global item and messing up the entire site in one fell swoop there. So you can just disable global items for your clients if that's something you're worried about. You can enable or disable whole settings tabs. So something I like to do is, if I'm introducing someone to the Divi builder, I might just disable the advanced settings and custom CSS, especially if I, as the designer, have already spent a lot of time configuring these options for Divi, and I really just want the client to be able to edit the content, the text. I'll just only enable the general settings. That's something you can do, for example. But you can also drill down within the general settings to various settings types. For example, you can disable settings and enable them based on what they do. So, for example, you could have a role that only allows the client to edit content and colors, for example, in which case you'd want to disable configuration and fonts and buttons and layouts. And once this is saved, when that client logs in as the editor and they open up the blurb module settings, for example, there's not going to be any settings for editing fonts. You're not going to be able to adjust the layout, for example. You're not going to be able to change the icon from being at the top to being on the left. All you're going to be able to do is adjust the blurb header, adjust the content, and change the colors, and that's it. And maybe even want to take away the color option because you're afraid they're going to mess with the design. Just in that case, you might want to only enable edit content. In that case, all they're going to see when they open up those blurb module settings is the text fields to edit the header text, edit the icon, edit the content itself. So that's a great way to use the Divi Role Editor as well, to really limit what your client can do, just so they're not too overwhelmed with all the options, and also so they don't accidentally edit something they didn't mean to edit. And you can also enable or disable specific modules. So if you don't want your client messing with specific modules, you can just disable their use here. For example, you might want to disable the shop module if you don't have WooCommerce installed, or you might want to disable the code module if you don't want them trying to add custom code to your site. Maybe you want to disable the portfolio and blog modules, since those take a bit more understanding. You have to have projects and blog posts before those modules will even work. So that's some examples. So if you want to disable those, you can here. And then when your client goes in and tries to add a new module, these aren't even going to show up. And so let's just show you how this works exactly. So like I said, I've logged in as an editor on my other page here, and I'm just going to disable a few things to show you how it works. So let's just say I'm creating this role for my client. I want them to be able to edit stuff on the page, but I don't want them to be able to add anything to the page. I don't want them to move stuff around either. I just want them to be able to come in and, edit their header text, edit their body text. Maybe, they want to change their company message, that kind of stuff. And so I'm not going to allow them to add stuff. I'm going to disable that. I'm not going to allow them to move stuff either. I'm just going to allow them to edit things. And so if I save this, and then when I go over to my editor role here and log in, you're going to see, well, there's no more option to add things. I can't move stuff either. The drag and drop functionality is gone, but I can still edit stuff. I can still go into the blurb module settings, and I can, edit those settings accordingly. And so that's, one just quick way to really simplify things for your clients. You might also want to limit the use of the Divi library, since, kind of that's shared by the administrator and the editor. You might not want to allow them to add things to the library or add things from the library. So, for example, if I save that, go back here, refresh. No more saving to the library. Obviously, I can't add from the library because I disabled adding stuff altogether. But now the Divi builder has really been streamlined to just editing what's already there, what you've set up for the client. Moving down, we already went over the library, but if you want to enable the library, but then disable certain functions within it. So, for example, maybe you want to allow them to use stuff from the library, but you don't want to allow them to save new things to the library and clutter your library. You also maybe don't want them to be able to edit global items. You can disable those individually as well. Moving down to the general settings tabs, like I said before, maybe I don't want them to be able to mess with advanced design settings and custom CSS. If I disable those, well, then you notice when they open up the settings for any of these modules, rows, or sections, they're just going to get the general settings. That advanced design settings tab and the CSS tab you usually see here, those have been removed because they probably don't need to mess with that stuff. You've already spent the time designing your site to look great. They just need to change their content. But moving even further and drilling down into the individual settings, for example, coming back here, let's look at this call to action setting. Maybe you don't want to allow them to, mess with the orientation and color and the button. Yeah, the admin labels, all this stuff. There's a bunch of stuff they just, maybe don't need to see, don't need to mess with. You just want to allow them to adjust the actual content, the text, whether it be the button text or the content itself here. And so you can disable those things. So let's say I only want them to be able to edit colors and content. I don't want them to be able to edit fonts or the layout or the configuration. And just to clarify, we've kind of grouped the options that are available into Divi into these, few categories here. And so generally configuration means kind of like the overarching configuration of that module. For example, if you're working with a blog module and the configuration might be, selecting your categories, kind of those general settings that affect what is output in the module. That's the configuration. The layout is another category that might affect, for example, if you're editing your blurb and you want to put the icon on the top or put it on the left, or maybe you're editing your blog module and you want to switch between grid layout and standard layout. Those are layout options. Buttons, so whenever there's a button, we have a lot of options around buttons, especially in the advanced settings tabs, so you can disable or enable that. Fonts, a lot of things have font selection options, so that's a different thing you can enable and disable. Content, that always just controls the things inside the module, the header text, the body text, the icon itself and the blurb, that kind of stuff. And colors, pretty self-explanatory, editing text colors, background colors, and stuff like that. So like I said, it's pretty common if you're handing something over to a client, maybe you just want them to be able to edit the actual content itself. You don't want them to accidentally, deselect all their blog, categories or switch to grid layout when, the page just really wasn't meant to have a grid layout. And so in this case, I'm only letting them edit content and colors and buttons. And so I'm going to save these roles, switch back here. And then when you open any of these settings, there's going to be stuff missing. So if I open up my blurb module, for example, I can just edit the content. That's it, just the content and the colors. There's no more option for switching between icon types, circle icon, not circle icon. There's no option to change the layout, whether it be, using the icon on the left versus icon on the top. They can just come in here and change their title, change the URL, change the icon itself, change the icon color, change the text color and stuff. And if I were to go back here and remove colors, well, even some of that stuff would be removed as well, all those color options. So I can come back here, remove the ability to edit colors, and when I save and refresh, you're going to see that these blurb settings have been limited even more. So no more color options. All you can do is edit the content. Put in the title, choose the icon, type in the blurb content itself. And so, yeah, this is a pretty good way to kind of hand over the website to the client, because it takes away all the things they don't need to see, and also takes away the things that could allow them to make your website a little bit more ugly than you had planned, right? You've chosen the colors already that look great. You put a lot of work into that layout, and but you don't want to waste a bunch of time. Every time the client wants to, update their bio on their about page, you don't want to have to be logging in there every single time. So this is how you hand over that to your client. And finally, enabling and disabling entire modules. So if we allow them to add and delete items again, but we don't want them, for example, to be able to use the shop or blog module. If I saved that and went back here and refreshed, if I were ever to add a new module, those wouldn't show up. So you're not going to see the shop module or the blog module here anymore. And so if you want to limit your clients to using just, kind of simple modules, then that's how you do that. So yeah, it's a basic overview of the role editor, and you can, create custom roles for each of the standard WordPress roles, as well as, use custom roles that you've created with plugins, or custom roles that are automatically added with plugins. For example, the shop manager here, which was added by WooCommerce. In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to use Divi's right-click controls. Just like any standard software application, when you right-click on something inside the Divi Builder, you're going to get a list of things you can do. Now, these right-click controls give you quick access to functions you may be already familiar with within the Builder, but it also lets you do a few new things as well. So you can right-click on modules, you can right-click on rows, and you can right-click on sections as well. And each of these have some different things you can do with them, and I'm going to go over each of those now. So when you right click on a module, you'll see rename, save to library, undo, disable, lock, copy, paste, and preview. Now if you right click on a row or section, you're going to get a different option called collapse, and so I'll go over that as well. It only applies to rows and sections. So some of these you may already be familiar with: rename and save to library. Rename will let you automatically change the name of the admin label. So before, you would have to, for example, open up the blurb settings, scroll down here, and change the admin label. And when you change that, it would update the label here, just so you can organize your builder a little bit more. Now, just to make it a little bit easier, you can now do that in a right click. So if I choose rename, you could change it here. And when I save, you'll see that it's been updated. Next up, save to library. This is also something you'll be familiar with. Usually when you save to library, you have to do it from within the module settings here, save to library. But you can also do it on right click, and then just like renaming something, it's just a little bit easier to do. Gives you quicker access to this, and you can save right to the library from right click. Next up is undo. So Divi comes with undo and redo controls. So whenever you make an action in the Divi Builder, you can undo that action all the way back to the beginning of the session that you started with. And you can also redo when you undo something. So there's standard undo and redo buttons here, as well as your whole history of actions. And you can click through to any of these states and go back in time and forward in time. But you can also do that when you right click as well. So previously I deleted this blurb here. If I wanted to undo that action, I could do that. Actually, I renamed, so if I wanted to undo the renames I did, I can keep undoing all the way back to the beginning when I first deleted that blurb. And if I change my mind, I can also redo. So you can redo by right-clicking as well, all the way back. So if you made a mistake, or if you change your mind about that mistake, you can undo and redo from right-click. Next up is disable. Now what this does is it retains the shortcodes within the layout, so it will retain the things you built in the builder. For example, this row, when it's disabled, it'll still be here, but it will no longer show up on the front end of your website. So if I were to view this page right now, you'll recognize it as the Divi demo, and here are those blurbs that I was just showing you, that row. If I change my mind and I don't want to have this appear, maybe I'm still working on it, I'm not satisfied with it, but I'm not ready to delete it yet, I can just disable it. So I can come down here and I could just disable this whole row. And once it's disabled, you'll see that the opacity changed just to signify that that's a disabled section. And if I updated the page and viewed the page, you'll see that that section is gone now. So, but it's still there, so you don't lose your work. And if you ever change your mind, you can just come back here and re-enable it. So right-clicking on a disabled section will have an enable option instead, so I can enable that, and then it's back. So this is particularly useful if you have maybe a special offer going on. Maybe you like to show the special offer just a couple times a week or a month, and you kind of want to enable it and disable it, but you don't want to delete it. Then that's particularly useful in that situation. So yeah, anything that you might want to show sometimes but not other times, you can just disable it and enable it instead of deleting it, which is a little bit more convenient. So next up, we have lock. Now, we made the lock option for a couple reasons. First of all, if you just kind of want to signify to yourself that this module is done, it's finished, I don't want to mess with it anymore, I don't want to accidentally edit it or delete it or anything like that, then you can lock something. And once something is locked, it can't be moved or edited or deleted until it's unlocked. And you can unlock something by clicking the lock icon here, or just right-clicking and choosing to unlock it. But the main reason we made the lock option isn't for yourself, but more for your clients. And so what this enables you to do is when you lock something as an admin, that item is completely locked for any other role within WordPress. So for example, let's say you built a website for your client and you have this page. It's for a new person, the Divi Builder might be a little bit complicated to take in, and maybe your client wants to be able to edit your page and you're a little bit afraid to give them free reign over the builder. You just want them to be able to edit things that they would want to edit, such as the text modules. And you don't want them messing with stuff, for example, like the portfolio modules. That might be a little bit more complicated for them to do. So what you could do is, let's say you don't want them to edit this portfolio module, you could just lock this section. And then when your client logs in as an editor role or contributor role, something other than admin within WordPress, they're going to see this lock section, but they're not going to be able to unlock it. That's completely locked for them. So that's the main function of the lock item on right-click. It just locks that section, and once it's locked down, anyone that isn't an admin logging into your website, they can't touch that area at all within the page. And like I said, you can also unlock stuff by just clicking this unlock icon. So that's quite useful for freelance developers and small design agencies when collaborating with your clients and when you're giving them access to the page. Next up after lock is copy. So using right-click, you can copy and paste things, which is extremely useful. And you can even copy and paste things between different posts and pages. So let's say, for example, you're starting a new page and you want to copy this section and then paste it on your new page. You can do that. You can just press copy, head on over to your other page, and then paste it right here. So you can see it's been pasted. And depending on what you've copied, you're going to be able to paste it in different areas. So for example, if I were to copy this blurb, I'm not going to be able to paste that inside of a section, so I don't have any paste option here. But I can paste it inside of another column, so I can paste that blurb there. And if I copy a row, for example, I could paste that row inside the section. And as I did before, if I copy a section, I can paste that after another section. So you can also copy things into blank columns. So if I copy this blurb, then you can paste it inside of a blank column like that. And like I said, you can also copy and paste things into new pages. So let's copy this section. And I'm going to add a new page. I'm going to use the Divi builder. And then I'm going to paste after the section. And there we go. So in the past, the only way to do this was to save things to the library, then load them from the library. But we realized people were kind of using the library as a copy and paste mechanism, and then their library was getting kind of overloaded with things they really only wanted to use once. So if you want to copy something and paste it somewhere else, using right click is definitely the best way to do it. And you can copy and paste within your own page, or copy and paste between different pages. Next up is preview. So whenever you're editing a section or a module, you can preview it using this icon here. This is something that's quite useful to do. We wanted to make that available and as easily accessible as possible. So just like we added rename and save to library to right click, we also added preview. So you can just right click and preview anything in the builder and skip right to this page, which is great. So the final option here is called collapse. And like I said, this is only available to rows and sections. And what it does is collapses the section down just to, if your page is getting a little bit hard to comprehend and you want to make it more easy to understand, either for you or your clients, you can collapse some sections down and maybe just keep the ones that you're working on open. And you can collapse rows as well. So maybe you're done working with this and you want to collapse these, you can do that. And what's also great is you can combine this with lock. So let's say this is a page you're working on and you're handing it over to your client, and you don't want them to be able to edit anything except for, let's say, this text module. And that's kind of like the main content on the page, and everything else is more dynamic, like it's a slider or a blog feed, something like that. So you can collapse all this stuff, and then you can lock it too, which just kind of keeps the page a little bit more organized. You can lock everything down, and so on. And then when your client sees the page, they're not going to be able to touch any of that stuff, and they can go straight to this text module and just edit that instead. So that's one way you can kind of combine lock and collapse, which I like to do. And then when anything has been collapsed, you just click that drop down arrow there, and that will expand it back to its original size. Yep, so that goes over each of the right-click controls. I would encourage everyone to use these because it will save you a ton of time, and it also adds a couple neat new functions to the builder that lock and disable as well as collapse.